Good afternoon, everyone. This is Jeremy Pond, horse racing editor at the Action Network, joined by TVG analyst and Action Network handicapper Andy Biancone to talk about Saturday's Belmont Stakes at Belmont Park in Belmont, New York. Andy, how are you?
Jeremy, all good. Finally back in Florida from Kentucky. Just did like a whole drive. It's just been driving the past 3 days, I feel like, but we made it. Excited for the Belmont.
Horse racing season is heating up. Triple Crown coming to a close. Obviously, there's been some pros, some cons. Now we get here to a very interesting field of 8 going in the Belmont. Some new faces, some old faces. And I think it's actually a pretty good betting race from the standpoint of, I think there's probably 6 horses that could realistically win this race. There's a couple I would probably toss immediately. But what's your thoughts on the field in general of this 8-horse group?
I love Mo Donegal. I mean, this horse, you can't knock his form at all. He's always hit the board other than the Derby, in which he had a horrible trip going 10 wide from the 1 post. Just, he's such a game horse. And I never really gave him enough credit. I feel like when I saw him at the Holy Bull, he didn't impress me physically, but he was the first horse my eye went to at the Derby in the post parade. He looked absolutely incredible. He had just developed so much from February to May. And I mean, obviously coming out of the Derby, it's a really taxing race, but I like that he had the Preakness off. I like that he's been training at Belmont. He clearly likes Belmont. He broke his maiden there. So right. I think they're all things that are going to be in his favor. And Pletcher always fires on Belmont Day. He always comes so ready. So I love Mo Donegal for sure in here.
With this race being at Belmont, it's nicknamed the Big Sandy. The track surface is a lot different. I was talking about this earlier in a podcast. The track surface is so much different than Pimlico, where the Preakness was held, than Churchill Downs, where the Kentucky Derby was held. You've had horses run at all 3 tracks. Tell me the difference of what really makes this such a tiring, taxing surface for horses. And now they're going 1.5 miles on this surface, which probably all of them will never run again this distance. What makes this surface so interesting and kind of tricky?
It's a deep surface, a very sandy surface. I mean, Belmont is known for being called Big Sandy, and that is just absolutely true. It's very deep, very tiring, and especially the turns. See, like Churchill Downs has a long stretch. Well, Belmont has very wide turns. So horses, a lot of horses are like people. Some are left-handed, some are right-handed. Some horses, when they switch right, that's their stronger lead and they can close even faster. And some horses are left lead horses and they can go better on the turns. So, that's kind of a difficult thing to know and understand when you don't, know these horses deeper than what you see on the form. But, right. That's something that definitely plays a factor.
Yeah. And talking about the horses in the past history of the race in recent years, this does not set up for closers. And half this field, 4 or 5, you get some deep closers here, right? Barber Road, Monaco comes from off the pace. He's probably going to be closer, but is it tied to the surface that you can't close on this in the sweeping turns as opposed to the tighter Pimlico style turns? Or is it just the distance is so long that those horses just can't hit that next gear because they hit that gear at 3/4 or a mile?
I think the turns have a lot to do with it. That stretch is not very long in comparison to those turns. Horses, believe it or not, riding Belmont is extremely different. Horses get lost on it. I mean, you have horses at Churchill Downs who are trying to run off every day and they're keen and on the bridle. Then you take them to Belmont, they're like, what is going on? You know what I mean? Like the poles are almost like completely in different, in different locations in relation to where they'd be at like Churchill Downs or a normal like mile track, So that is something to adjust to. And I think the horses who have been here training on this track, who have had to work on this track, those horses are going to be at an advantage in comparison to those who maybe just shipped in.
So now let's take a look at the morning line favorite, We the People. I am pretty adamant that I'm fading the favorite here for a few reasons. One, I don't like the price at all, 2-to-1 odds. I imagine he will probably go off as the favorite or co-favorite with Mo Donegal in that 5-2 area. He won the Peter Pan by 10.5 lengths. It was a good sealed surface. So it was a wet day. I watched the race last night. It was back at May 14th. He just got alone on the lead and started loping along. 23-3, 47-1, 111-1. Those are the fractions that he clipped off. And there was nothing behind him. It was just, honestly, it's like I said to you earlier, it felt like it was a good allowance race and not necessarily a stakes race. I feel like the horse needs to have the lead. What are your thoughts on this horse? And the fact that he ran in the Arkansas Derby and faced Barber Road, for example, who's also in this race at 10-1. Barber Road beat him by 13 lengths in that race. And honestly, I don't think we the people had many excuses. Pratt could have moved him to gotten him wide. He was in the 9 post that day. Nobody to his right. There's only 9 horses. He was able to dip him down and not try to clear the other 4 that were trying to go for the good position. He got him in position, sitting tucked back behind the leaders, and he just did not fire. And I don't know if it had to do with the dirt in his face or whatever it may be. What do you take from that Arkansas Derby in comparison to what we're seeing now? Because the odds are they're very different than what I anticipated.
Absolutely. I mean, there's no question this horse was extremely impressive in the Peter Pan, but like you said, the field wasn't that strong. It's quite obvious. I mean, like you said, this horse likes to be just off the pace or the pace himself. And honestly, he seems like kind of a difficult horse, kind of like a finicky horse. If you look at the comments from the Arkansas Derby, it said he was really washy. And I think, what that means is this horse was really geared up, washed out. I don't know. Maybe he won't handle the crowd of Belmont Day. That's another factor that plays a big part, is just the energy of the crowd. It's so different from like a typical race day, or, just these big days really can take a toll on certain horses who can't handle it mentally. This horse is by constitution, which is, by Tappet. So out of a Tisnow mare, those are kind of temperamental types of horses. So, I mean, I think it's a big advantage that he's pretty much the lone speed in this race. However, that is just I don't know if 2-1 is very fair. I think you could get a lot of other horses for better prices in here.
And one of those horses we talked about too earlier was the filly Nest. She's coming in off the Kentucky Oaks. Another Pletcher horse. What are your thoughts on the filly? I mean, obviously the fillies have had some success in the Triple Crown of late. Obviously, Swiss Skydiver in the 2020 Preakness, but we can talk about the Belmont in 2007. Rags to Riches wound up beating Curlin, who is probably one of the best horses in the last 30 years. And I believe Curlin is Nest's sire. I believe that's her dad. So that would be kind of an interesting tie right there. Dad couldn't win the big one, but his daughter could. What are your thoughts on the filly? I love the price at 8-1. I think she's going to go drift down. I think people will hammer her at the window and get her down to 5 or 6 just because of that. People love the filly winning, right? You love a good filly. So what are your thoughts on Nest and her chances?
I like Nest too. I mean, she's obviously an incredible filly. She's been very consistent. She's been successful at Belmont. She's been training here for a while. I really, in Todd we trust. I really don't think Todd would put this filly in a spot if he wasn't absolutely confident in her. And I think I've seen her train at Belmont while I was there. She looked absolutely incredible. I think the race could set up nicely for her. She's a bit more versatile, and I think she's going to be closer to the pace in here. So she could just kind of sit nicely off with the people. Obviously it's going to be a big step up, but I think she just gets better with distance. So I'd say she's a live contender, and I love the 8-1 price. Are you kidding? Great.
Yeah, no, I think I absolutely agree with you wholeheartedly on that. Last horse individually to break down before we hit a couple of things for our bets. Rich Strike. Obviously none of us had him in the Derby. He wasn't even in the field, I think, when you and I recorded our podcast. So we get our refunds on that, I think. If you didn't like him in the Derby, why do you like him here? He's a dead closer. He's got to come from miles away. Again, I think you and I look at this race the same way. I think these horses are all going to be closer together. I don't think they're all going to be stretched out. I think it's going to be more clumped this time. 7-2, I don't mind the price. I would prefer him 4 or 5-1. But was that just a fluky Derby, or could this horse actually coming into his own. I mean, his conditions, his connection skipped the Preakness, which was a brilliant move in my opinion. You know, they didn't just go for the Triple Crown. It's very hard to win the Triple Crown. That horse would have been compromised, everything, this, that, and the other. Perfect time. You know, he's rested now. Coming into the Belmont, he's fresh. Does he have a chance to win?
I just don't see him winning it. I don't know. I think he's an incredible horse. Clearly has a ton of energy. I mean, this is a horse who Eric Reed says has to gallop 2 miles every day. Otherwise, he's, leaped he's on 2 legs coming home, which is, I mean, that's incredible. A lot of horses wouldn't take that. So this horse is a horse who very much loves his job, is obviously, really game. And I love to see that going into this kind of race, but I just don't think there's going to be enough speed to set up for him. And I think he shipped in a little bit late for my personal preference. I actually, it was funny, on one of my days on the track, I was in the tunnel after the break and Rich Strike was right in front of me. And I was like, oh my gosh, Rich Strike. And I was jogging my filly, and I saw him galloping. And to be honest, as good looking of a horse as he is, I wasn't very impressed watching him gallop in front of me in person. I thought he looked a lot better on Derby Day than he did here. I mean, obviously in photos, he looks incredible, but just in person, my eye, when I saw him galloping, it wasn't the same horse I saw on Derby Day. So I just don't really see this being the best spot for him.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So obviously with Rich Strike in the race, Mo Donegal, Nest, We the People, we've talked about them. Is there anybody live outside of those horses that you can see maybe could spring a wild upset? I mean, Nest at 8-1 would be an upset, right? So is there anybody else, or do you think it's just going to be someone in that group? Is there someone that we're just missing of the remaining 4? Because I personally toss Skippy Longstocking and I toss Golden Glider. I don't know why Golden Glider's in this race, which means going to win this race probably because I'm saying this. But is there anybody there you think that could potentially spring an upset here?
Oh, it's hard. It's difficult. I mean, Barber Road with Joel Rosario, that's very interesting. Blinkers off. This horse is very competitive. I think my only concern is maybe he's a little bit, could be a little bit tired. He's done quite a lot. And he's shipping in a little bit late. So those are kind of things I consider. I don't know. He's definitely a game horse. I think he could take a piece of it potentially. I don't know. I don't mind Skippy Longstocking that much. I think this is, I don't know. This is a horse I picked when he won that optional claiming back in March, and he was 15-1. And I was like, I love this horse. He's physically great. This is going to be a huge step up for him, but I think he's another one who has just been kind of coming into form and is going to appreciate the distance. So those are both, both of those have pretty good prices on them. I think that's what I'm going to go with in terms of long shots, Jeremy.
Who would you put right now? Who would you put your money on if you're picking to play a win, place, and show bet?
I would go with Mo Donegal, Nest, and Mo Donegal. Nest is the hard part.
And I totally agree with you. I think for me, an exacta is going to be the way to go if you can box up 3 or 4 and then hopefully catch a price on top. It just seems the win, play, show wager for this is very tough. I think the exotics are going to be the easier for me to piece together, like trifectas, supers, very easy for me to do that, to pick. But the winner it was easier to handicap the Preakness with early voting. I knew that I was going to pick that horse before they even drew the post positions. The Derby was the same. I picked Zandon and I don't regret that. This one, I am watching tape after YouTube video. I'm trying to find something, and I'm with you on that. It's tough, right? So
absolutely. Yeah, I'm gonna go Mo Donegal, Nest, and Barber Road for my long shot to hit the board. But Mo Donegal, Nest, Exacta Box for sure. Love those. Love Team Tap in this race.